Hello, my name is John Kelly.
I have no disclosures to.
In this module, we will be reviewing success in terms of diabetes remission or reversal versus normal glycemia or normal blood glucose. We will also be looking at remission success rates with bariatric surgery and very low calorie meal replacements, and success rates for lifestyle medicine interventions and key factors affecting remission success. Finally, we will review the expected success rates at 6, 12, and 24 months. Our 4 formal learning objectives are listed here. First, you should be able to explain remission or reversal of diabetes in the context of treatment success.
Number 2, discuss success rates with bariatric surgery, very low calorie diet, and other related interventions. Number 3, discuss key factors affecting success rates for reversal of insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. And fourth, to discuss lifestyle medicine dosing effects on success rates.
The definition of what we mean by remission and treatment success has changed over time. The older definition by Booz et al., Diabetes Care 2009, had 3 levels of remission: partial, complete, and prolonged. The newest definition of remission by the American Diabetes Association and the European Association for the Study of Diabetes by Riddle et al. In Diabetes Care 2021 is much simpler. Remission is defined as 3 months or longer of subdiabetic glycemia, that's a hemoglobin A1C of less than 6.5%, or less than 48 millimoles per mole, without diabetes medications. For lifestyle medicine interventions, the time must be 6 months or longer. It is important to understand that this definition of remission does not require a return to normal glycemia, which is a hemoglobin A1C of less than 5.7% or less than 39 millimoles per mole without diabetes medications.
I want to point out
the definition of what we mean by remission and treatment success has changed over time. The older definition by Booz et al., Diabetes Care 2009.
I want to point out another amazing article published in Frontiers of Endocrinology in 2018 by Van Omen et al. And the title of their article was From Diabetes Care to Diabetes Cure, the Integration of Systems Biology, E-Health, and Behavioral Change, which we might say is really includes coaching and various smart app tools to help move diabetes care to diabetes cure. Again, quoting from the authors of this article, we provide evidence for the reversibility of insulin resistance and the remission of type 2 diabetes, specifically by diet and lifestyle. So we see an editorial in Lancet, February of 2018, and quoting again, remission of type 2 diabetes, mission not impossible. It goes on to say a non-pharmacological approach should be revived. In clinical practice, anti-diabetic drugs seldom result in normalization of glucose metabolism if patients' lifestyles remain unchanged. This has been the key factor that has sort of gotten diabetes care off track, as we'll see, and as you have seen throughout this course, as we've reviewed how the initial studies looking at the progression of type 2 diabetes basically did not look at or change or address lifestyle habits. They only were looking at metabolism and medications. And it is in fact well proven now that if lifestyle continues to be toxic to the pancreas and to the liver, indeed, we will have insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. However, as we're going to see, it's very easily reversed with sufficiently intensive changes.
In 2022, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine published a position statement on type 2 diabetes remission and lifestyle medicine. In the paper, the authors stated, "We propose that remission should always be held as the primary clinical goal, and that lifestyle medicine interventions that produce changes leading to remission should therefore become the standard of care. There are certain logical consequences that then naturally follow from this position. First, The option for such treatment should be presented to patients in an informed consent process before other treatment offering minimal possibility for remission is prescribed. And secondly, reimbursement supporting this approach should be provided for such lifestyle medicine treatment. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine position statement went on to say, the underlying causes of type 2 diabetes have long been identified as excess weight and insulin resistance. There's been a lack of consensus on whether insulin resistance may be caused by excess weight or whether excess weight is caused by insulin resistance. It has been suggested that there is a bidirectional relationship. However, one thing these two causes have in common is that they most often result from excessive caloric intake. This causes rapid insulin resistance due to increased oxidative stress in as little as 1 to 2 days. This occurs before weight has been gained. Ongoing intake of excess, poorly chosen calories maintains the insulin resistance, and we might add, thus produces and maintains the increasing type 2 diabetes with increasingly higher and higher serum glucose.
So let's now turn our corner and look at success rates with bariatric surgery. Again, this has been talked about previously, but I want to review this just a bit. So here, and Porres et al. First published, look at this is back in the Annals of Surgery in 1995, and a gastric bypass operation in 608 morbidly obese patients with what we used to call non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, or type 2 diabetes, or impaired glucose tolerance. So there was 330 morbidly obese patients that got a gastric bypass operation. The result was that the management after the surgery maintained normal glucose, normal insulin, and normal glycosylated hemoglobin, A1C, in 91% of the patients for as long as 14 years, and this reported in this particular study. Then in the Annals of Surgery in 2010, about 15 years later, Fornares et al., they were looking at the remission of type 2 diabetes after gastric bypass, looking at the mechanisms and 2-year outcomes. And what they found here was that with bypass surgery, type 2 diabetes can be improved and rapidly put into a state of remission. And this was found to be true regardless of the weight loss in the immediate term. The A1C improved by 2.9 absolute points after gastric bypass and 1.9 absolute percentage points after banding. And that was at 2 years of follow-up. The results were both clinically and statistically significant in both of these groups. Again, Porres publishing in the Surgery Clinics of North America of August 2011, a very interesting article here. If you look, you'll see from the left-hand side the adjustable gastric banding and the little graphic depicting how this is done. The next one over, the C, is the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. And again, you can see on the more invasive, bypassing more of the gastrointestinal tract. And then when we get over to the last one, the biliopancreatic version, we bypass large portion even of the small intestine. And so then going up top, looking across the top at the resolution of type 2 diabetes and other conditions, and what we see is there's a definite progression. The more of the gastrointestinal tract is bypassed in the intervention, the more dramatic the improvement in these conditions. This is not to advocate by any means that we take these heroic measures of bypassing large portions of the digestive tract. But what it illustrates is that the more intensive the intervention, calorically invasive the change, the more dramatic the effect on metabolism and on type 2 diabetes. It's also interesting to me to notice the other lines here. The resolution of hypertension also was the improvement in hyperlipidemia, hypercholesterolemia, and triglycerides, again, dramatically improved. Not much difference on that one between the Roux-en-Y and the biliopancreatic bypass. And then the percent of excess weight lost improved dramatically as well. Very enlightening study and depiction here. Now looking at another study, this was published in September 2013, Diabetes Care, Lingbe et al. And they were looking at rapid improvement in diabetes after gastric bypass surgery. Is it the diet or the surgery? their statement. Diabetes improves rapidly when post-bariatric diet is provided to obese patients with diabetes before undergoing the Roux-en-Y bypass surgery. This was a bold study, and I really appreciated the work they did. You can see that after the screening and enrollment of subjects, there was 2 study periods with a washout in between. The first study period, subjects received the diet only, the diet that they also received after the surgery, and it was a very low-calorie diet for weight loss. And you can see they had measurements for 10 days. Then they had a washout, and then study period 2, where they actually had the Roux-en-Y bypass surgery there on the 3rd day. And when we look at the results, this slide shows the improvement in overall glycemic control. And it's remarkable that actually in this particular case was more profound with dietary intervention alone than after the Roux-en-Y bypass with the same diet. We can see that the result by the end of the 9th and 10th day is very similar for the 2 groups. But this clearly showed that the diet is adequate to produce the metabolic change. Originally, 20, 30 years ago, the thought was that the bariatric surgery was somehow altering hormonal balances and secretion of various hormones in the digestive system. And now we know, while that there are some of those changes, the dramatic improvement actually comes from the dietary change. Here's a study that really turned things in a different direction. This was published in October 2011 by Lim et al. In the journal Diabetologia in Europe. This is part of the Roy Taylor group in the United Kingdom. What they did was they took a small group of diabetics and they put them on a controlled feeding study. And they put them on 625 kilocalories per day, using primarily a liquid diet with some non-starchy vegetables, under 650 calories a day. What I've done is I've shown the controls in the top left, and then we're going to go across. You see the baseline, 1 week, 4 week, 8 week, and then the controls are repeated on the bottom right. So if we look up here at the top left again, the controls, these are the non-diabetics matched for age and other conditions. And what we're looking at is the inverse of insulin resistance. So basically, we're looking at insulin production, insulin release from the pancreas. And you can see in controls, right after eating at 0, there is almost an immediate little jump in insulin production. And then about an hour or so of the meal's digestion. And then as it's released into the small intestine from the stomach, we see a significant peak of insulin production. And it's quite steep and fairly brief, actually. Then we look at the baseline for the diabetics, and we see that the early response is practically nil. And even after 1 hour, when the stomach emptying takes place, there's a very attenuated anemic response. And of course, while we're not seeing it here on this chart, we know what's happening is the blood sugars are, of course, going out of control because insulin production is so affected, so reduced. Then at 1 week, that's on the top right, at 1 week, we're already seeing beginnings of improvement, and quite an improvement actually at the insulin production, stomach emptying at 60 minutes. So then looking at the bottom row, looking at 4 weeks on the left and 8 weeks in the middle, we can see by the 8th week, the insulin response at the stomach emptying at 60 minutes is actually higher than the controls. It's a super response. The response, however, at the early release, a few minutes after eating, is still attenuated and has not reached a normalization yet. But this study was published in 2011 and definitely made some waves in the field. And one of the things that was quite interesting was the effect it had on ordinary diabetics that read about this and wanted to reverse their own disease. Here I want us to look at a February 2018 study published in Lancet. This was by Lean et al. This is, again, part of the Roy Taylor group in the United Kingdom. The title of the article was Primary Care-Led Weight Management for Remission of Type 2 Diabetes. It was what's called the DIRECT trial. It was an open-label, cluster randomized trial, meaning that they randomized the practice groups, not the individuals. And so different practice groups would either be randomized to use normal diabetes education and management, or the special intensive weight management that was based on the counterpoint study that we just mentioned, where we showed the remission with a very low calorie diet in 8 weeks. Well, the result here you can see is that there was a tremendous improvement. Looking up at the top left, this is the proportion that were achieving 15 kilograms or more weight loss, and there was about 24% that achieved that target goal. In the next one over the top right, we see that this is the proportion that were
achieving remission. We're talking here about an A1C less than 6.5 without any anti-diabetic medication. This was achieved by 46% of the experimental group overall at 1 year. Then if we look
down at the bottom, the researchers have stratified the results. So we can see on the y-axis, this again is the percent achieving remission, and it goes from 0% for those that had zero weight loss or even weight gain. Dose response, you can see 7%, 34, 57, and 86%. So those that achieved the goal of 15 kilograms or more, that would be just about a 33-pound weight loss. That group had 86%, had full and complete remission, which is comparable or better than some studies with gastric bypass surgery. Then looking now, I want to talk about success rates with dosing. And I'm first starting here with a study that has nothing particularly to do with diabetes, but it's published in JAMA in 1998 by Dr. Dean Ornish and his group, looking at reversal of coronary heart disease, which is now well established. It is well known that we can indeed reverse coronary artery disease, including calcification of the aortic ring, etc. So here we can see in the study by Dr. Ornish, published in 98, when they stratified the treatment group into 3 parts based on adherence. That's on the x-axis, or the most adherent on the left, medium adherence, and least adherent over on the right. And then on the y-axis, they charted the average change in diameter stenosis for each of those 3 subgroups. The dose-response relationship was very evident.
Lifestyle medicine dosing has been explained in previous modules, but a quick review may prove helpful. More modest lifestyle changes may be sufficient for prevention or very mild disease, but more advanced disease requires more intensive lifestyle changes to be sufficiently therapeutic. This parallels a similar effect of dosing for medications, with higher doses being required for more advanced and/or more acute disease states. The intervention used in this study is described as a, quote, non-surgical intensive lifestyle intervention.
Well, this is the same kind of thing that we find with diabetes reversal and insulin resistance reversal. So let's take a look at that here. We're going to be looking at success rates and how it is affected by lifestyle medicine dosing. First, quoting a study from the Journal of Diabetes Research in 2015, Monolab et al., and this study was entitled Diabetes Remission After Non-Surgical Intensive Lifestyle Intervention in Obese Patients with Type 2 Diabetes. And basically, the program is outlined here in the slide. It included 5 things: an intensive interactive medication adjustments, so they're closely following their medications, which is always essential when you use intensive lifestyle change. 2, they had a structured modified dietary intervention. We're not going into the details, but it was not a very low calorie diet. This was just a dietary intervention for diabetics. They had a graded, balanced, individualized exercise intervention. They had a cognitive behavioral support. And 5th, they had an adult group education. This was a program that was typically a group size of 12 to 15 individuals, 2-hour weekly sessions, and you can see here demonstrated exercise in the gym, reviewed food and exercise logs. This is being done weekly, reviewing the blood glucose log, adjusting the medications, and having a couple of 30-minute didactic sessions. Here's the outcome of this. You can see on
lifestyle medicine dosing has been explained in.
Here's the outcome of this. You can see on the left-hand side, they had 88 studies that completed the 1-year follow-up. Of that, they divided it into 3 groups. On the left, there was those that had a major improvement. Their A1C dropped but to less than 6.5 with or without medication. That was 15 individuals, which was just about 17%. But the partial remission or the complete remission there in the middle and on the right-hand side, there's only 2 that fell into either of those 2 groups. So a total of 4 that had remission, partial or complete. On the right, I've actually shown a column graph showing this. And while there was improvement in 17% or better, actually this was a somewhat dismal outcome, very little reversal or remission. But what we find is that when we have a more intensive intervention, we get better results. So let's now look at the Look Ahead study published in JAMA in 2012 by Greg et al. The title of that article, Association of an Intensive Lifestyle Intervention with Remission of Type 2 Diabetes. And here we have a wonderful study. They followed these individuals very well for 4 years, one of the longest running careful, rigorous measures of lifestyle intervention for diabetes. Looking at the left-hand side, we're looking at the prevalence, percent prevalence of remission. And in this study, the chart shows partial or complete remission, any remission. And you can see it's comparing an intensive lifestyle intervention to diabetes support and education, the standard diabetes support and education given, recommended by the American Diabetes Association. And we see that the first year, intensive intervention had 11.5% of the individuals that achieved partial or complete remission, compared to about 2% for the diabetes support and education. As you look at that, you can see over the period of 4 years, the percent prevalence of remission, partial or complete, dropped. It was still considerably better, almost 4 times what the diabetes support and education, but still it was waning with time. The right-hand side is actually looking at continuous remission. So individuals who had 4 years or more of partial or complete remission, and you can see that the numbers dropped considerably. But nonetheless, the intensive intervention was considerably more effective than the diabetes support and education. So when we're talking here about dosing, this study becomes an excellent illustration of the importance of maintaining adequate dosing to get the desired treatment effect. No surprise that dosing has a major impact. So let's now turn the corner looking at a study by Hines et al. In the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism in 2017. The title of this paper was Piloting a Remission Strategy in Type 2 Diabetes, Results of a Randomized Controlled Trial. Here they had 3 groups. They had 2 intervention groups and a control group.
83 participants were randomized for 1 year to either an 8-week intensive metabolic intervention, or 2, a 16-week intensive metabolic intervention, or 3, standard diabetes care. During the intensive intervention period, weight loss and normal glycemia were targeted using lifestyle approaches and treatment with metformin, acarbose, and insulin glargine. Diabetes drugs were then discontinued in the intervention groups, and all participants were followed for hyperglycemic relapse. Primary outcome was normal glycemia with a hemoglobin A1C less than 5.7%.
You can see a 1-year follow-up goes up to 52 weeks, and the hollow circles are the controls, the top line in the 2 graphs. Then the next one is the 8-week group with the solid squares, and then the 16-week group is the triangle. And what we see is that there is a dramatic improvement in the first 8 to 16 weeks, greater improvements in the 16-week program than in the 8-week.
Let's go to the next slide and look at the relative risk of diabetes improvement in the intervention groups compared to the usual care control group, based on the hemoglobin A1C criteria, where complete remission was defined as an A1C less than 6.0, that's 42 millimoles per mole, without medications. Partial remission was defined as a hemoglobin A1C less than 6.5%, which is less than 48 millimoles per mole, without meds. And regression was defined as an A1C less than 7.0%, which would be less than 53 millimoles per mole without medications. Note that this study used the older remission criteria for complete and partial remission.
I'm looking over on the right-hand side now. and the relative risk of 1 is no effect. If it's lower than that, if it's to the left, as it says, that would favor the control doing better than the intervention. If it's to the right, which all of these numbers are, it favors treatment. Of course, the error bar, the 95% confidence intervals, crosses the 1, and so these were not statistically significant improvements in the top 8-week group. If we look in the bottom 16-week group, however, both the partial or complete remission was significant and the regression or remission was definitely effective. The bottom line from this study shows us that, again, the dosing, the intensity, but how long the intervention lasts also is important in improving success rates. Now I want to look back at the LEAN study. We talked about this one earlier, and I want to show a comparison here. So this is February 2018 from Lancet. This was where they randomized the practice groups in the United Kingdom. And this is the stratification, so that based on weight loss on the x-axis, you can then see on the y-axis what portion that achieved complete remission. In this particular study, it was complete remission. I'm going to now add the look-ahead results from the one-year results. And we saw this earlier on a different scale. But when you put it on the same scale as the results from the direct trial, it becomes really evident how dosing is so important. And keep in mind that the two columns on the right-hand side, the look-ahead intensive lifestyle intervention and the ADA diabetes support and education, those were actually looking at achieving partial or complete remission. So it's really not a proper comparison to the results from the direct trial, which were only looking at complete remission. I just don't have data to show to compare only the complete remission in the look-ahead trial. So the conclusion of this is that absolutely dosing is critical to determining the success rates. So I want to now look at some results from Diabetic Medicine published in 2013 by Sarah Stephen and the team, Roy Taylor's team in the UK. The title of this paper was Population Response to Information on Reversibility of Type 2 Diabetes. The reason I want to bring this in at this point is this was the results that they published of individuals who, on their own, decided to make lifestyle changes after they published the results showing tremendous reversal in just 8 weeks. Because many people are of the opinion that the patient will not make lifestyle change. They say, well, people will not make changes. Well, the facts are that that's not true.
This study shows the results from 77 persons self-reporting their type 2 diabetes reversal, defined as a fasting blood glucose less than 110 milligrams per deciliter, that would be less than 6.1 millimoles per liter, and or a hemoglobin A1C less than 6.1%, that would be less than 43 millimoles per mole, off of their diabetes treatment.
So on the x-axis, you can see the amount of weight loss achieved by these individuals who, on their own volition, after seeing the study published in 2011 in Diabetologia, they contacted the team there and either told what they had done or they asked for advice about. And actually, the team created a website for supporting these individuals as they did this. As I recall, the article said about a third of them did it without any doctor help. A third of them, their doctor actually helped them and monitored them. And 1/3, their doctor actually recommended against it, but they went ahead and did these things, made these dramatic changes. And what we see is that the on the y-axis is achieved fasting blood glucose. The line is drawn at the point where below which would be considered remission. Above that was not. They did not achieve remission. And the bottom, again, the main point is individuals on their very own will actually make dramatic changes when they know that it has the potential to reverse their diabetes and insulin resistance. Let's take a look at another study published by Stephen and her team there, Roy Taylor. This was in Diabetic Medicine in 2015. So after the results they had with these individuals and noticed that were spontaneously making lifestyle changes, they noticed a pattern that had to do with how long the diabetes had been in existence. How long had the patient had the diabetes? So on this chart, you see on the x-axis is the years that the individual has had the diagnosis of diabetes. And then on the y-axis is the achieving fasting plasma glucose in normal range or not. What we see here clearly is that there's a tight pattern over on the left around the 5 to 6 range. And this is those that had the diabetes less than 5 years, had generally universal success in achieving a remission. Whereas looking at the dots over from 8 years and more of duration, we can see that there was not the same success rate. Although do notice that there's a number that even at that number of years of duration still had remission. This is from the same article, another chart that's quite revealing. So what we see is on the left-hand side is those who had a short duration of diabetes and the results on their fasting plasma glucose in up to 8 weeks. And then on the right-hand side of this chart is those that had long duration diabetes. And some of those did achieve remission, but many did not. The point then clearly being made is that the duration of the diabetes and its level of management. If the blood sugars have run uncontrolled, the effect on the pancreas is worse than if the blood sugars have been under somewhat control. So now I want to talk specifically about the success rates 6, 12, and 24 months. So we've talked about a number of factors. What can we actually expect to achieve? Well, this is a chart taken from the 2-year results from the DIRECT study. This was published, you can see at the bottom there, May of 2019, as of when we're recording this presentation, taken from Lancet Diabetes Endocrinology, again by Lean, and this is the Roy Taylor group in the United Kingdom. The title of the article, Durability of a Primary Care-Led Weight Management Intervention for Remission of Type 2 Diabetes, 2-year results of the DIRECT open-label cluster randomized trial. What we see is on the 2 charts here, on the left, we're looking at the odds ratio. On the y-axis, you can see participants achieving 15 or more kilogram weight loss. So we're looking at weight loss, and the controls, year 1 and year 2, are on the left 2 columns, and then the blue. Then the pink on the right side of the left charts showing year 1 and year 2 and the intervention group. We saw these year 1 results already, 24.2% that lost the 15 or more kilograms, but at the second year, that number had dropped to 11.4%. And of course, we're going to see a similar effect then on the right-hand chart. We're looking now at y-axis participants achieving remission. So percent achieving remission. Again, we had seen previously the pink was 68 in year 1, 45% that had achieved remission. In year 2, that had dropped to 35.6%. And in the controls, we see, again, there was very little remission. And even in the control group, that dropped over into the second year. So the take home here is, you might say there's a wind blowing against managing insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes in our culture, because caloric intake is urged in a variety of ways in our society, from glossy magazines and other things to the things that we have to walk past at the checkout counter everywhere we go. These are not things that are going to help our diabetes. They're going to work against us. And so the point is, we have to help our patients maintain long-term change. But the evidence is clear that those that succeed can have tremendous success rates.
So here we have another slide showing data from the same study. And this is our stratified by weight loss. We can see on the leftmost side is less than 5 kilograms of weight loss. Second set of columns over is 5 kilograms to just under 10 kilograms. The next group is 10 kilograms to just under 15 kilograms. And the rightmost group is 15 and more kilograms of weight loss.
So in summary of the success rates, the best evidence tells us that the success that we're going to have, our patient will have, is very dependent on 2 key things: the degree of the lifestyle changes made, which can be measured by weight change or by dietary change, exercise level, and long-term adherence. Those are the 2 key factors. What it boils down to is dosing. When you think of lifestyle change is the treatment, then these are the measures of the dose. The success rates, of course, then are affected by intensity. We looked at the 8-week and 16-week. We looked at a variety of studies showing that the intensity of the intervention has a lot to do with the success rate. The duration of the disease, how long the individual has had diabetes and how well or how poorly controlled it's been, has an effect on the ability of the pancreas to recover and how fast it can recover. So this then summarizes what we can expect 6, 12, and 24 months success rates in reversal.
So let's look at our learning objectives again. We've explained remission or reversal in the context of treatment success. We've discussed the success rates with bariatric surgery, very low calorie diet, and other related intervention. We've discussed key factors affecting success rates for reversal of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes remission. And we've discussed lifestyle medicine dosing effects